He's opinionated. He's unapologetic. He's always real. He is Brett Mason. This is the Brett Mason Show.
Thank you to everybody that's listening to the show, not only live, but also on the podcast version, which is available on iTunes and Stitcher and iHeartRadio and iTunes Radio and all those things if you just look for a Brett Mason Show. So you can listen anytime at your leisure. We especially appreciate folks who listen to the show live, though, as we're trying to make this a more caller, listener-centric show, maybe open up some phone lines. So a couple of things. The easiest way to listen to the show live is, first of all, if you have a smartphone, Android or iPhone, if you just download our app, which is available in your app store by searching for Brett Mason Show, BRETTMASON Show. Anytime we go live, it'll be available on that app. And if you set the app to get you notifications, it'll actually notify you, hey, the Brett Mason Show is live. What you want to do about that? The other way is for you to listen on the website. I have now created a vanity domain that goes straight to the live show page, which is Brett Mason Show, BRETTMASON Show, Brett Mason Show. Will take you directly to the live page. Now, here's the deal with that. If you go to the page when we're not live, which would be any other time of the day, any day of the week, other than between 9 p.m. and whenever I stop, which should at least be 9:30, usually closer to 10. The show's usually between 30 minutes and an hour. You're going to get whatever the last show we did. That's what I'll be playing when you get there. So if you show up there at 8:59, and I haven't started the show yet at 9, you're going to be getting a replay. Just refresh the page, and it'll update again, and it should catch the live show when we start at 9. I'll be honest with you. I try to be professional, but there ain't nobody paying me to do this. So the show may start at 9:01 some nights. It may start at 9:03 some nights. So if it's an old show, just hit the refresh button on that page at brettmasonshow.com. The number to call in, should you like to opine, as Bill O'Reilly would say. I shudder that I even used Bill O'Reilly in a sentence on my show, now that I think about it. Here is the number to the show. Now, people have begun calling this number throughout the day, wanting to talk about issues they're hearing on the podcast. If the podcast ain't live, you ain't going to get nobody on the phone. I'm not answering it. I'm just not going to answer it. It's not that I don't want to talk to you. It would just be kind of pointless to do it throughout the day when I have other things to do. The number is 334-403-4500. 334-403-4500. So you can hang on to that. You want to call in later on the show. Since the call-in aspect is a new part of the show, I have committed to the fact that I will take phone calls pretty much anytime they come in, although I would prefer them to come later in the show after we've had some time to get settled in and touch on the subjects of discussion for the evening, of which I have two tonight. I've decided to do two. Sometimes I have a show that's all about one subject. Sometimes we'll cover a couple. Sometimes we'll cover 4 or 5. It just depends on what the subjects are. Do I think they tie in together, and how much stuff do I think I'll have to say about the subject? I think those primarily are the things that guide that. The first thing on the topic of discussion tonight will be Kim Davis. She just recently appeared on the Megyn Kelly show on Fox. I thought Megyn kind of asked fair questions to get some real answers, but as you know, Fox News is a sellout for issues like this, so of course there was going to be no hard questioning. But she asked some questions that I think yielded quote-unquote real answers, if that's a real thing or not. So we'll just jump right into that and explore some of those. Now, if you're watching this episode on Spreaker, in the description of the Spreaker, or it should be on the description of the Facebook page if you see the post there, there's links to these videos and stories that we mentioned, so you can see them in their entirety there. This will be courtesy of Fox News, where these clips come from. Please don't sue me, Fox News. So one of the questions she asked was, or she brought up the point that the country maintains, and scholars maintain, that our country is probably the strongest and continues to protect freedom of religion. And even recently, the president has said in recent remarks just this past week that it's the fundamental aspects of our country and our Constitution that continues to protect freedom of religion. And she wanted to know what Kim Davis thought about that.
In 2015, when a county clerk can go to jail because she is upholding her religious beliefs, I would have to question his statement.
I think that's what you would call deflection, maybe deflection of the issue, because she didn't really answer the question. She kind of answered the question. But when you twist your answer around to fit your agenda in that you maintain that because you went to jail, it means that freedom of religion isn't being protected. Again, Kim Davis, it goes to your fundamental misunderstanding of the Constitution of the United States and how our country protects freedom of religion. Our country is set up in a very specific way to protect freedom of religion. And one of the ways it does that is by preventing people in government power from using their religion to force their beliefs or dogma on people not in the government. In other words, ordinary citizens. In other words, the people you serve. So your answer, was buffoonery. It was just absolutely buffoonery. I'm still open to Kim Davis changing my mind, though. And that could happen before all these clips are over. We'll see. Kim Davis, what is the reason you refused to issue marriage licenses? Just explain to us simply, Kim Davis, why you refused to issue marriage licenses.
God's word states that a marriage is between one man and one woman, and that's what rules my faith.
God's word says that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's what rules your faith. See, the problem is that wasn't the question. The question was why did you refuse to grant marriage licenses to gay people, not what rules your faith, because you're free to have your faith. And according to your faith, you would never marry another woman. According to your faith, the pastor of your church would never marry a gay couple. According to your faith, you would never teach or preach or espouse the message that gay people can go to heaven. You're free to do all of that. But in your role as a government official, with the full force of the United States government behind you, you chose to force your religious beliefs on people of whom you were their servant. You were in a position to serve them, not vice versa. They weren't there to get a religious lesson. They weren't there to be saved. They weren't there to be proclaimed Christians. They were there to get a legal document, which according to the laws of the United States of America, they were in compliance to get. They met all the criteria. So when you answer the question, why did you refuse to give people marriage licenses, this answer is complete hogwash.
God's word states that a marriage is between one man and one woman, and that's what rules my faith.
See, that's something you need to be saying in Sunday school if you're teaching the Sunday school class. Or that's something you would say in church if you was testifying. Or that's something you would say in church if you was preaching to people that came to your church that wanted to know and understand your beliefs better. That is not the answer to the question, why did you not issue legal documents that according to the laws of the United States of America, people were entitled to receive? You failed to answer that question. Let's move forward. I'm losing any faith, though, that she's going to change my mind. I'd hope that she would. So I'm going to summarize Megyn Kelly's next question. They say if they cut out an exemption for you, Kim Davis, so that you didn't have to give marriage licenses, then exemptions will have to be made for every government worker, no matter their religion, as long as what they do in some way conflicts with their beliefs. For instance, Muslims who would not issue a marriage license to people who are divorced, because under the Muslim religion, and I would submit to you, under the Christian religion as well, you guys just choose to omit those verses because you don't like them. You're not allowed to marry again if you've divorced. So a Muslim wouldn't issue marriage licenses under those set of conditions. Or how about religions that don't believe women should drive? There are certain sects of Christianity that believe that, as well as Muslim religions that don't believe that. So if one of those people is hired to work at the driver's license office, do we cut out exemptions for them so they don't have to issue driver's licenses to anybody because it goes against their religious beliefs? Oh, Kim Davis, please explain to us why this is okay.
I could if I thought it was a valid argument. The fact is that marriage is defined as one man and one woman. You're not talking about a racial issue. You're not talking about, I'm just talking about marriage in general. So you have millions of Christians who object this whole same-sex marriage issue. Are their rights invalid? Are their rights not worth anything? I mean, it's a valid point, and it's a fight that's worth fighting for.
I think this clip completely summarizes why Kim Davis is confused and why Christians all over the United States of America are confused. Let me start back at the beginning of this clip and let's analyze it, shall we?
I could if I thought it was a valid argument. The fact is that marriage is defined as one man and one woman.
Religiously speaking, marriage is defined as one man and one woman. And I would even go further, because we're going to get into that. But I would even go further to say that according to your specific religion, your specific sect, your specific denomination that you adhere to, it's defined as one man, one woman. Because there are several Christian sects and Christian denominations that believe men can have more than one wife. So you can't say Christianity believes that. You can only say that your particular sect of Christianity believes that. Your particular denomination of Christianity believes that. Either way, that's what your religion believes. That isn't the legal definition. So there's a difference between the legal definition of something and the religious definition of something. The religious definition of something applies to you personally and your religion. What you do at your home with your family, what you do in your church, what you do when you're out in public representing your religion, your God, your Savior, your dogma, your Bible. Those are when religious definitions are important or even matter. In matters of government officials who have no religion one way or the other, there's nowhere in the Constitution or nowhere in our government that religion is going to matter in one way or the other as to what the loss of something is. It's completely irrelevant because we can't have laws that reflect every religion. And since we're a nation that believes in and is founded on the freedom of religion, that means we're a nation of many religions. There's many, many religious people living here, and they all have different religious beliefs. And that's why the government can't have laws based on any one specific religion, because you would then alienate and trounce on the religious freedoms of other religions. Let's continue on with this ridiculous clip.
You're not talking about a racial issue. You're not talking about, I'm just talking about marriage in general.
No, you're talking about your religious beliefs about marriage. You're not talking about the actual legal definition of, you're talking about your religious definition of marriage.
So you have millions of Christians who object this whole same-sex marriage issue.
And see, there's no problem with that. Your religious freedom, which is protected by the Constitution of the United States, says that you can object to it. Kim Davis, it says that you can object to any other type of marriage other than one man, one woman. But that's as far as your religion goes. That means that your pastor doesn't have to marry anybody that he doesn't want to marry. Your pastor is not required to marry gay people. He's not required to marry two men, not required to marry two women, not required to marry one man to 18 women, not required to marry one woman to 18 different men. He's not required to do any of those things, and your church isn't required to recognize any of those things because your church and your religion are tied together and you have the freedom to express those in any way you see fit. But you're talking about what you as a government servant are doing with the power of the United States government behind you. That on people who don't believe what you believe, and that's the exact opposite of freedom of religion. That's the exact opposite of freedom of religion. You're denying the freedom of the constituents, the people you're there to serve. I don't understand why it's so hard to understand. I really don't. I'm all for Kim Davis's religious freedom. I think she should be able to believe anything she wants to and live her life in that way. Nobody's denying that. She's not being denied that. On to clip 4. So the one main couple, and there were several, there's straight couples sued her, by the way, because she wasn't into license to them either. What's her religious standing behind that? Doesn't your whole claim that it's based on religion go out the window when you refuse to hand a license to the straight couples that came into your office? Yeah, then we begin to see the facts come out. We begin to see that it really wasn't anything about religion. It's just about you. So she humiliated this couple, one of the couples that sued her, and they were a gay couple. And one of the things they said was that she made them feel less than human. This was her response to that.
When they first came in, they demanded that I talk to them, and they had cameras going and everything. So when I was talking to them, they wanted to know why I would not issue them the marriage license. And I simply told them about when God created earth. He spoke everything into existence.
So let me get it straight. First of all, when they came into your office, they quote unquote demanded to speak to you. In other words, do you mean them as citizens of the county that you were elected and appointed to serve wanted to speak with the person who wasn't doing their job? The person that was refusing them their legal right to do something, you mean they demanded to speak to you? Were you shocked by that in some kind of a way? Was that unsettling to you? Because I don't know what else you would expect. You weren't doing your job. You were denying them legal documents that by all accounts of the law, they were legally entitled to receive. You were refusing to give them to them. And of course they demanded to see you. They wanted you to answer the question why. Let's listen to the clip again so I can expound more on this. Ugh.
When they first came in, they demanded that I talk to them, and they had cameras going and everything. So when I was talking to them, they wanted to know why I would not issue them the marriage license. And I simply told them about when God created earth. He spoke everything into existence.
So when they asked you, why won't you issue us a license that we are legally entitled to receive, your answer to them was to give them a Bible lesson? You feel that that's your job as the clerk in your county? That's your job description, is to quote Bible verses and teach people about the Bible? I think you've confused your position in the clerk's office with the position of Sunday school teacher at your church, because that would be a place more appropriate for you to do that. Or were you to meet with them outside of your office? Say you told them, I would love to share with you the gospel of Jesus Christ. Could I meet you after work today? Could I call you on my lunch break? Would you like to meet me at lunch today at the bistro downtown? I'll buy you lunch and share with you the joys of Jesus Christ and explain to you what happened in Genesis. I would love to share the word of God with you. No, you as a government official decided to use your time on the government dime to deny somebody something they were legally entitled to. And on top of that, to add insult to injury, you decided to preach to them. If there's no more clearer example of an abuse of government power and intrusion to religious liberty, let me be very clear. When a government official with the full backing and force of the federal government is using their government position, their government title, and their government time to preach to you a specific religion, can there be any more clear violation of the Constitution of the United States of America? If you don't think that I'm right about this, imagine for one moment you as a Christian person, and I'm assuming most people listening to this show are Christian. There's possibly other people listening, but let's just talk to the Christians for a second. Let's assume you as a Christian person went into your local clerk's office at the courthouse to get some type of legal document, and they wouldn't give it to you. And when you asked the clerk why they would not issue the document that you were legally entitled to receive, that person began to preach to you from the Quran. A government official with the full backing and force of the government of that county and the federal government and the state government began to preach to you from the Quran. Would you not feel that the government was overstepping its bounds and interfering and enforcing and endorsing a religion upon you, trying to manipulate you. Oh, God, I don't even know. I'm at a loss for words. Like, I literally run out of words to say. I literally run out of words to say because it's so bizarre. It's so preposterous that anybody in this country could ever defend this woman's actions and pretend like she's some kind of religious hero. She's a religious zealot. She's a religious tyrant. And she used the power of her government office to deny the very citizens that she was appointed or elected to serve things that they were legally entitled to. It's beyond belief. I mean, it's just beyond belief. So I thought we would take a few minutes and explore Kim Davis's assertion, Mike Huckabee's assertion, and some of the other religious talking heads' assertion that the Bible defines marriage as being between one man and one woman. Let's just explore that. It's completely irrelevant, by the way. Just let me say that as far as this woman supposed to do her job and not use the power of the government to force her religion down the throats of people who believe differently than her, whether the Bible defines marriage as something between one man and one woman is completely irrelevant in that regard. She just violated the Constitution. She's completely in the wrong. And if they threw her under the prison for 50 years, I wouldn't care. Because in my opinion, there's nothing more dangerous on this continent, this country specifically, than a religious tyrant. If you want to see things go bad in a hurry, let's start allowing religious tyrants to run this country. Because then what do you got? Well, you got yourself in Iraq. You got yourself in Afghanistan. You're like, oh, well, they believe the Quran. Have you compared the Quran to the Old Testament? Have you compared them? They say the exact same things. Beheadings, cutting people's hands off, stoning people. It's the same thing. The only difference is that Christianity has evolved to remove those things from their religion so it's not there anymore. But that doesn't mean somebody couldn't come along and use the power of the government to take that Bible and go, I'm a Bible believer and we're putting these things back in. It could happen. You don't think it could happen? Religious tyrants is the most scariest thing that could ever happen to you or I. People with the power of the government forcing their version of religion on you. There's nothing in this world more scary than that. And if you don't think that's true, go ask all the many people over in these places where Muslims rule, like ISIS and some of the more extreme militant Muslims rule, where they behead people, chop people's arms off, and stone people to death on a daily basis. And ask them how pleasant they think religious tyranny is. Well, I don't believe that. That's not my religion. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It matters what the person in power, with the power of the government behind them, what do they believe? And if you think they're all going to believe like you believe, you're delusional. Try to find some more churches in your state or even in your county or even in your town that believe like you believe. Ain't many of them. Every single church believes differently. And you want to put somebody in government power? Espousing one specific type of religion and rules based on that religion? Well, who gets to pick the rules? Who gets to pick what parts of the Bible they enforce? Not you. Not you. So it's completely irrelevant as to whether the Bible defines marriage as being between one man and one woman. It has nothing, it is irrelevant in no way whatsoever to whether this woman is a religious tyrant or not. But since she makes that claim, I thought we would at least spend some time exploring it. I believe a case can at least be made that she's incorrect, and I think a pretty strong case. At the very minimum, it should make you consider that. Because first of all, nowhere does it say that. But if you follow history, which is something people should do, you should read books and stuff. It's fascinating what you can learn from books. But I think it's been pretty clearly established that the whole concept of marriage being between one man and one woman didn't really happen until the rule of the Roman Empire, who, under the blanket of Christianity, established marriage between one man and one woman as the norm. I think it's reasonably clear up until that time it most certainly was not. It certainly wasn't in the Jewish communities, and the Jewish community was the community that Jesus came from. And at that time, I think it's more than clear that the Jews were not married strictly to one woman. At least that wasn't a requirement. There's too many examples of Jews who were married to more than one woman. Not only at that time, but throughout Jewish history. Let's go back and look at an Exodus. How about Exodus 21:10? You can write this down and review this verse later. But it's clearly written in Exodus 21:10 of the husband, if he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish the food, clothing, or marital rights of the first wife. Now that's the Bible, and that's a definition of marriage. And that particular definition says, well, if you want more than one wife, the only problem with that is you just can't feed one of them less food and give her less clothes than you give the other one. So feel free to add on extra wives, but just make sure they all have equal amounts of food and equal amounts of clothes, and you're golden. This is a clear indication more than one wife was not only acceptable, but it was commonplace during that time. It was so commonplace that they had to put rules about how to do it in the Bible. So long as you didn't give more food and more clothes to one of your wives than you did to the other wives, you can continue to take on wives. Marriage was not between one man and one woman. How about the father of Israel? How about a man that was more blessed than any other man ever in the Bible? His seed and his seeds forever and as long as it should go, Father Abraham. Well, he couldn't have a kid with his wife Sarah, so what did he do? He had sex with her slave to give him a child. That hardly seems like the traditional definition of marriage, does it? Now, this is Abraham. He's the father of the Jews. He's the man that God chose to bless more than any other man ever in the history of the Jewish or Christian religion. There's never been a person blessed more than him or promised more than him. One man, one woman? I think not. Well, he didn't marry her. No, he didn't marry her. He just took her as a slave, had sex with her, took the child for themselves, and then not only that, Sarah, who had second thoughts about it, tried to treat her badly over something that she made him do to start with. But that's a whole nother issue. How about King Solomon? Let's talk about King Solomon. King Solomon is a king that 2 Chronicles 9:23 says, and all the kings of the earth. This is every king. I don't know how many kings were on the earth at that time, but apparently it was more than one, because it says all the kings. This is a man who, according to 2 Chronicles 9:23, all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom. Why? Why do they care about his wisdom? His wisdom, which God had put into his mind. Solomon had the wisdom of God implanted into his mind. So Solomon, who had the wisdom of God implanted right into his mind, not only had 700 wives, he had 300 sex slaves. Sex slaves. 1 Kings 11:3 says, he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. Now, it doesn't say anything about it being bad for him to have 700 wives. It doesn't say anything about it going against God's law for him to have 700 wives. All it says was he allowed them to lead him astray. And let me tell you, I don't think it's that uncommon for a woman to lead a man astray. That's a story that runs throughout the Bible from the very beginning. Allow me to refer you to Eve. Well, Brett, you're talking bad about women. No, I'm just telling you what the Bible says. It's a common theme throughout the Bible. 1 Kings 11:3. Solomon, he had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, which were sex slaves. Biblical definition of marriage. Really? The biblical definition of marriage is one man, one woman? Now, to be fair, if somebody wants to bring this point up, Solomon at some point in his life turned away from the God of the Bible, and the Bible says God was angry at him, but nowhere does it say anything about his wives being the issue. And no point does it say God became angry with Solomon because he had 700 wives. It was because he had chosen to worship other gods was the problem. Now, even though the Bible clearly says, and you'll hear this quoted in church after church after church throughout eternity, even though the Bible says God is the same always. He never changes. God never changes. God is the same always. Many will argue that these are Old Testament examples. Well, they don't matter anymore. Ironically, one of the Bible verses that is most used about homosexuality is an Old Testament Bible verse, but except when it comes with verses we don't like, then suddenly it's this. That's from the Old Testament. Unless it's a verse we want to quote, then, well, it's the Bible. You can't have it both ways. But nevertheless, I decided to pick one verse from the New Testament, and I could have picked a few. There's several different examples I could have picked. One would be talking about whether marriage was even good at all. There's a definitely pretty clear example in the New Testament where the best recommendation for you, period, is to just not even get married. So marriage shouldn't even be something you aspire to. But I chose not to read those verses. Let's go with Mark 12:19, where it talks about if your brother dies and he leaves a wife with no children, you have to marry her. Now, it doesn't matter if you're already married. That's completely irrelevant. You just have to tell your current wife, look, my brother Bob died. His wife ain't got no kids. So now I got to marry her. And I got to have the sex with her. And I got to get her pregnant. I'm sorry, that's what the Bible says. Now, while that whole conversation that's discussed there, starting in Mark 12:19, was about a reference to Old Testament verses, Jesus never once said that those verses didn't apply. He never once says that those verses weren't relevant. He never once said that that particular concept wasn't relevant. He just simply said in the afterlife, you wouldn't be known in marriage. So you wouldn't recognize somebody having more than one wife or more than one husband. That would be irrelevant. He never once shoots down the theory or the concept or the law or the rule that even though you may be married, if your brother's wife dies, it is then incumbent upon you to marry her, have sex with her until she gets pregnant so she can have a child and you can have more than one wife. I think this whole argument, this whole assertion that there is some clear-cut biblical definition of marriage, I think is preposterous. Now, I think you can find verses to support it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you won't find any verse in the Bible to support it. I'm not going to cover those because if you're a person that believes that, you already know what your verses are. You don't need me to tell you. I will say it's a gray area. I will say I don't think you can stand on it and feel that secure about it. And I certainly don't think that it's anything that should ever enter into the government. It has nothing to do with the government. See, government marriage, as I've stated many, many times, is a legal contract that says what will happen to your property, what benefits you can receive, and things like that. That's the government aspect of marriage. There's no religious aspect to it. It just is a document. It's an agreement that you enter into that the government agrees to recognize that says if you have joint property and one of you dies, the other one gets what's left. It says if you've entered into this agreement, the government recognizes it. If you have kids, one of you dies, the other one gets the kids. It says if you've entered into this agreement together, you can qualify to be together on the same insurance plan, receive same benefits in certain situations. It in no way whatsoever has anything to do with a religious aspect of anything. It has nothing to do with whether people are going to heaven or hell. It has nothing to do with whether people are Christians or not Christians, saved or not saved. It's just simply a way of saying the way we will divide up your stuff if one of you dies. And here's benefits that you're eligible to because you've chosen to live your life together as one unit. You've decided to come together as one unit rather than two individual units. You've decided to pursue life as a team. You've decided to take on the world as a team. And since you've legally committed to taking on the life and the world and all that should come against you as a team, here's certain benefits that you will accrue. You can come under one insurance plan. If one of you dies, you get the other one's kids. If one of you dies, You've earned the property that both of you built together. Has nothing to do with religion. Has nothing to do with God. Has nothing to do with Christianity. Has nothing to do with heaven or hell. On the other hand, there is a religious component to marriage. And I think there can be no doubt about that. And I think it's fine. I don't think there's any problem with it. However, all that matters is whether you as a church, whether you as a pastor, whether you as a set of religious rules will marry people under a certain set of circumstances. That's something that freedom still exists. There's nothing has changed to that freedom. Kim Davis could grant marriage licenses all day long. And if the people left there and they couldn't find a preacher or a priest or a rabbi anywhere on this planet to marry them, then they would not get a religious wedding. Now they can find judges. I guess notary publics can marry them. There's certain other people, captains of ships could marry them. There's certain people that could marry them, but there's certainly no church going to be forced to marry them. The churches and all of its congregants still get to practice their freedom of religion. That hasn't been infringed on in any way whatsoever. The whole thing is ridiculous. And the fact that she went to jail over it is preposterous. The only last thing that I'm going to say about that is because she says that she begged for some kind of carve out, some kind of exclusion so she didn't have to do that. And she's just a liar. She's just a liar. She had deputy clerks that were more than happy and willing to issue those licenses so that she didn't have to do it. She wouldn't have had to even have done anything. She could have sat in her office, kicked back, sipping on a slushie from Sonic and eating a chili cheese coney and fries, and never had anything to do with the issuing of the license. She had deputy clerks that not only could have done it, but have I believe all of them, I know at least the majority of them, have gone on the record that not only would they have done it, they wanted to do it. And she wouldn't allow them to do it. So she didn't want an exemption. She didn't want to carve out for her religion. She wanted to make a point. She wanted to be a spectacle. She wanted to stand up and be made some kind of martyr. And she got exactly what she wished. She's not unhappy about it. If you think Kim Davis is unhappy about the events that occurred, you're sorely mistaken. I promise you she's happy because she got exactly what she wanted. And anytime somebody gets exactly what they want, they're generally happy. Hello, you're on the show. Who am I talking to?
Hey, man, this is Jayon.
Jayon, how you doing, brother?
Kim Davis has, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the news seems to make a spectacle out of everything lately.
Right, that's what they do.
You're right. She wants to be a spectacle, and you could clearly see it on the news when she was up there smiling, all feeling gratified. But I would like to point out that. I don't know if you touched on this too much, but it's the media's fault that this gets where it goes,
Well, no doubt. The media made her into a martyr. The media egged it on. The media covered it nationwide, and they blew. This is one little clerk in a little county in Kentucky, and she's a nationwide story. It's really quite remarkable.
It's amazing what they pick and choose to be a nationwide story.
No, it's been a nationwide story. Well, I've read stories in publications that are not even American that it made the news. So it's even past this continent to that point. But as to whether she likes being a spectacle, as to whether she likes being a martyr, she loves it. When she left the jail after whatever it was, 5 or 6 days, she had a stage that was 6 feet off the ground with big speakers blaring "Eye of the Tiger," where she came out like some kind of superstar, and that other religious tyrant, Mike Huckabee, stood up there and held her hand up like she had just won some kind of national award or something. and both of them claiming that that was all about God and Jesus. But I would ask you this, if that event, Jayon, was about God and Jesus, why would they not let Ted Cruz come up on the stage?
Well, she comes in there, and people have misconstrued stuff that the Pope has said, tried to put it around like if he was condoning what she's doing.
Yeah, he took his quote completely out of context and have said that he's on her side, which I think clearly, if you've looked at anything the Pope has said in the past 2 years, it would become pretty obvious that he's not going to be exactly on her side in this particular issue.
If people listen to your show, you pretty much nailed it. The Pope has nothing to do with her.
No, he may. I don't have the statement in front of me, but they took a statement that he said, and it supported really her, as I understood it, he supported her ability to have her beliefs, and he supported her ability to have deep convictions, but in nowhere did he say she was right by using her government position to deny and nowhere did he say that that was acceptable. That was not the point that he was making at all.
30-second sound bites and Facebook memes, God, that's what I worry about the most is people going and voting based upon that. You know what I mean? I mean, a democracy can't work that way.
Well, I read a statistic yesterday, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I believe it was about 80%. 80% of people 30 years and younger get all of their news and politics from Facebook and Twitter.
God, that's pretty sad, ain't it?
Well, it's very scary because rarely do you ever see anything posted on Facebook that's actually true. Like, if you go through all the stories that I see on my Facebook page every day, I'd say maybe 10% of them are true, and 90% of them are just completely made up. They're just, people can take a picture of anybody and put some made-up quote beside it, and suddenly it becomes the gospel. And it's humorous, but it's sad.
There's so much BS out there that it's actually hard to do because, something that come across there that falls in line with your set of beliefs, and you'll just think it's true, and turns out it won't be. It's just a mess.
Look, if you got a second, hang on the phone real quick and let me run down a little piece of this story, and I'll get your comments on that too, or if you're not in a hurry.
Oh, yeah, hang on for a minute. Go ahead.
All right, hang tight. I'll come right back to you. So this is more on a local level, and I have listeners that are nationwide, so in the sense that it's local, it may not apply to you, but it's certainly something that took over all over the South. But there's been a reversal in Houston County, Alabama, on the stickers that were on the Houston County Sheriff's Department vehicles. And this is a victory. Look, this isn't a victory for atheists. This isn't a victory for humanists. This is a victory for people who believe in religious liberty and freedom. That's who this is a victory for. And I really hope that people, in some ways, can really manage to see that and understand that. The decals have been removed from the Houston County Sheriff's Office vehicles. The Houston County Administrator Bill Dempsey said that there was a recommendation made on Tuesday of this week to the Houston County Sheriff to remove the decals. They were square-shaped decals on the Houston County Sheriff's Department vehicles that said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," and underneath it the Bible verse Matthew 5:9. All this started happening a couple of months ago when all these decals started going on vehicles and everything like that. According to Dempsey, the recommendation was made after he and the sheriff received 2 legal letters from organizations who were threatening legal action if they didn't remove the decals. Apparently, after speaking with a local attorney, along with the county's insurance carrier, that determined that the insurance did not cover legal fees, and understanding that they would lose in court, they decided to remove these decals from the vehicles. Jayon, this is a victory for liberty. Even if the Christians don't understand it, it's a victory when you don't have a government entity. But I find it interesting that the county attorney just came out and told them, "Look, you're on the wrong side of the law, and when we go to court, you're going to lose." And the county insurance ain't going to cover the losses, so you should probably take them off of there.
Absolutely, it's a victory, and it's a victory because they had an actual Bible verse. What is this, Matthew
5:9? Yeah.
Yeah, Matthew 5:9. So they had a Bible verse on their patrol car, and the government has to represent everybody. You know, not everybody believes in the Bible, and it's, the founding fathers, as you pointed out several times, stress this point, you can't have government intertwined up in religion. It's a disaster.
No, and there's been many examples of that right from the founding of our country right on through, well, I'd say recently, but it's getting harder and harder to find examples of it recently. But a lot of these atheist organizations who will take governments to court have not taken any of these law enforcement agencies that use "In God We Trust" to court because they probably wouldn't win those because those are so generic. It could be any God. It's not a specific religious reference, but in this instance, they actually used a Bible verse from the New Testament. Out of the New Testament, King James Version, and put it on their patrol cars, and I'm glad they had to take it off. Yeah, and they would have lost that in court, hands down. Any attorney would tell you that they would have lost that case in court, and it would have cost the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend it, too. But you use a specific Bible verse, you're going to lose. The Constitution is very clear on that. And frankly, I was surprised they even tried it. And now there's a Facebook page, Jayon, that's set up. I believe it has 4,000 fans in just 2 days. It went from 0 to 4,000 of people demanding that the stickers be put back on the car.
There must be an education lapse somewhere in our near past that has caused all this because you went to school, right there before I did, and we had some teachers that really taught us about this stuff.
I wonder if that's fallen off to some degree, and then I also wonder if maybe, I hate to say this, but I wonder if there's some less desire to teach that because there is an agenda, especially in the South, for schools to want to include religion in the teachings, and so they just kind of skip over that part because you certainly wouldn't want to teach something that went against what you're trying to do in your class.
Everybody thinks atheists are scary, but I think, people should be able to believe whatever they want to believe, whatever gets them through it. And I'm cool with that.
The scariest people to me, Jayon, aren't atheists, they aren't Muslims, they aren't Christians, they aren't Buddhists. The scariest people are the people who have a belief and they want to force it on you. Those are the scary people. No matter what the belief is, the people who want to force their belief on you are the scary people.
That's the last thing that the atheists want to do is force what are they going to force? Their non-belief? The separation of church and state is intended for a nation of diverse people. The diversity, I think, is very important, to this nation. We get the good from everybody.
You have such a level of intolerance for different sections of people now. I fear diversity may sadly be a part of our past now. I hope not, but it seems to be heading in that direction. There's too much hyperbole, man. Everything gets stretched to the extremes one way or the other, and there's no room for a middle.
The media, they seem to be doing their best to drive people apart, and that's not what we need. You mentioned it, most people are the same in their basic needs and, what they want for their family, and people are the same, People that you get to know strictly from television can be scary because television makes them out to be scary. But if you get to know an atheist, you get to know a Muslim, you get to know a Buddhist, you get to know a human secularist, you get to know a Christian, any of those, you generally will find out that they're pretty much just exactly like you. That ain't saying you can't find a psycho Muslim or you can't find a psycho atheist or you can't find a psycho Christian. Of course you can. But by and large, most of them are just like you. There's always the exceptions, and you can't judge anything by the exceptions.
You highlight the extremes and you kind of just pass over or gloss over what's the average or the norm, and you only focus on the extreme.
And that's what the media does every day. They go from the extreme to the extreme, and they pump up everybody, and everybody's mad as hell. It kind of worries me. With Kim Davis, a lot of people that are supporting her have the intelligence. They just sit down and think about it. They would understand, that this ain't good for them.
It's surprising to me how many people have failed to understand that, but sadly, those are the times that we live in. Brother, I appreciate you being a caller on the show tonight. First ever caller. I'll send you a plaque or something, a ribbon. How about that?
All right, man. That's great, man. I've enjoyed it. I'll talk to you on a turnaround maybe another day.
All right, brother. Have a good one. Thanks for calling in, man.
All right, thanks.
So there you go. We've accomplished our first ever goal of having a caller to the show. Jan's a good guy. He's a good guy. I've talked to him quite a bit on Facebook over different issues and opinions. I'm going to close the show talking about a point that he made, and it's a point that a lot of people may not realize is a monetary, financial, marketing decision. If you wonder why there is a Fox News that's so hyper right-wing extreme, or if you wonder why there's an MSNBC that's so hyper left extreme, it's called niche marketing. And back in the olden days, this is how the country's changed. I only got about 3 minutes, so I'll try to explain this. First of all, make no mistake that all news organizations are on the air for one reason, and that's to make money. They're not about giving you the truth. They're not about exposing hypocrisy. They're not about exposing deceit. They're not about exposing people who violate the Constitution. They are on the air for one reason, and that is to make money. So back during my time of growing up in the 80s, you had 3 channels. I remember when Fox News came out, it was a big deal. We had the big antennas, and we're like, God, we got to get one of those UHF, because Fox would only come in on UHF. And you kids listening, you don't know nothing about no UHF. But you had your regular channels, and then you had the UHF channels, which I think is like, what, anything over 18 or anything over 12? I don't know. Anyway, you got up into the higher numbers. And so Fox came around, and it was a new network, and they had all these cool shows like The Simpsons and, what was that show that the Fly Girls was on, the Wayans Brothers? I can't remember that, but they had that show, and so it was a hip, cool channel, but you couldn't get it. You had to have a UHF antenna where I lived. You couldn't see it. But at that time, you had 3 channels. You had NBC, you had ABC, you had CBS. You had 3 channels. And there was only 3 channels, and their goal was to reach a mass audience. They wanted to reach as large an audience as possible. So they made the news friendly to all. They made it very generic, very bland, and very vanilla. They talked about news stories that most anybody in the country, no matter what religion they were, no matter what nationality they were, no matter what race they were, would be interested in those stories because it was a mass appeal prospect. Today, you have 4,000 news sources, and the way they make money is by niche marketing. They will pick a niche, and they'll try to win that niche because it's too hard to win overall. You can't win everybody that wants to know something about the news, but you can win extreme right-wing Christian conservatives. You can be competitive in that niche. And so how do you do that? You just super serve what they want to hear. And you just reinforce their beliefs by super serving them what it is that they want to hear. And you just shove their beliefs back at them in the form of different stories. Same thing for the extreme left wing, liberal, socialist, whatever you want to say. That wing, there's news organizations that service that niche, and the way they do it is by taking what you believe, packaging it as stories, and shoving it back down your throat. It's called confirmation bias. So whatever your bias is, they confirm it for you by shoving stories that confirm that bias back at you. Confirmation bias. It's a well-known tactic. You can Google it on the internet. And so all these news sources do different niches, and they try to win those niches by super serving those niches and being the most popular. And the news and the truth gets lost somewhere in the middle, and you and I, the United States citizens, are the people who lose out. Well, landmark show tonight. We had our first caller. I thought Kim Davis would win me over. She failed. Nevertheless, we gave it the old college try. Thanks for listening to the show. Remember, weeknights, Monday through Thursday, live at 9 at BrettMasonShow.com, BrettMasonShow, BrettMasonShow.com. Thanks for listening. I enjoyed it, having you here. Appreciate the comments on Facebook, the comments on the text messaging and all that stuff. It's been a treat.
Download the free Android or iOS app. Search for The Brett Mason Show. You can subscribe to the podcast, download the free smartphone app, and find more ways to connect to the show at brett-mason.com/connect.